Oh, goody.
All right, what's going on, everybody? Zombies here again, and today we're back with another Marvel Snap video. So in this one, we are checking out some day one decks for the new Season Pass card, Loki. Loki is a 3-cost 5-power that reads on reveal, replace your hand with cards from your opponent's starting deck. Give them -1 cost. So really cool card. I'm excited that this is the Season Pass card we're getting, especially since haven't really been as interested in the last 2 Season Pass ones, but I think this one's going to be a lot of fun. So we're going to get right on into it. Before we do, if you enjoy this type of content, remember to like and subscribe. It does a ton to help out the channel. It keeps the videos coming. Yeah, let's dive into some day one Loki decks and some general thoughts on the card. I think this card has a lot of potential. 3/5, pretty premium stat line for a 3-drop, although I guess we are starting to see more 3/5s, but usually there's at least some downside or at least some condition with this. Loki, I guess there is a downside. You can't keep a hold of your cards, but definitely seems very promising. Mana cheat is always powerful. We've seen this multiple times throughout Snap's history. And even though it's going to be offset by the random element of not, knowing what we're going to be getting from the opponent or not getting the same stuff all the time from them, 1 cost reduction is something that's very, very powerful, as we've seen with numerous Sarah decks, Quinjet, etc. in the past. So I'm pretty pumped for this card. I'd recommend getting a hold of it, especially if you like this style of kind of like thief gameplay where you're working with your opponent's cards rather than your own. I think there are going to be a lot of people this archetype is pretty appealing to. It's also worth mentioning, since he's a Season Pass card, generally that's the best bang for the buck you're going to be getting in Marvel Snap is the Season Pass. So if you're only going to be buying one thing in Snap this month, Season Pass is definitely the way to go in my opinion, because not only are you getting a new card that is eventually going into Series 5, but you're also getting all the other resources and cosmetics that come with the pass. We can also see the spotlight stuff up here. I just included it because I've been including these in the previous videos, but Loki, obviously being a pass card, is not in the spotlights. So if you're just trying to get a hold of Loki, the spotlight isn't really relevant this week, but figured I'd put it up there anyway, just so people know. Okay, so we have some pretty cool stuff we can do with Loki. Obviously, a lot of it is going to be centered around generation and a lot of like Devil Dino style deck lists, but figured we'd start out with a deck that's a little bit different than that, and that is a bounce deck. So the idea with this deck is we have a pretty traditional bounce game plan. We play some pretty impactful 1-drops, namely Kitty Pryde for the Angela synergy and Collector synergy and whatnot. I think Loki is going to be really, really insane with Collector, because if we do have a decently sized hand and we Loki it away to a fresh new hand, Collector should get pretty big. But the other powerful 1-drops we have here, Iceman for some interaction, Agent 13 mainly because she replaces herself for the Loki effect, though sometimes she can give us a pretty clutch card as well, and the more recently buffed Hawkeye just as a decently statted thing that can get even bigger if we bounce it. Collector definitely going to be an MVP, and he's going to be making his way into all these Loki decks. Pretty insane card with Loki, and can't have a Kitty Pryde deck without Angela to go together just really, really efficiently. Speaking of cards that go together, we have Bishop, Mysterio, and Hitmonkey as its own little package here. Even with the nerf to Hitmonkey, I think it's still really powerful in bounce. Now, obviously, sometimes you're going to be shipping away your hand with Loki, so we're not necessarily going to go for the strategy every game, but I think this deck is best viewed as a bounce deck that's trying to do the bounce thing, but it has Loki as an option to where if we get kind of an awkward hand or things aren't really working out, or maybe it's just a bad matchup, Loki gives us a chance to pivot to a different game plan that might be a bit more effective versus the opponent. Mysterio, Hitmonkey still gets really big, and Bishop is still a really great payoff, not only for Mysterio, but for all the other cheap cards we're going to be playing throughout the game, and can't have a bounce deck without Beast, making our 1-drops free, and just being able to rebuy those powerful effects. And of course, last but not least, Chavez. This deck really, really cares about getting its early cards early, so being able to guarantee that with a higher percentage chance to draw each of them is definitely a must-have for this style of deck. Loki is definitely more of a backup plan rather than the main plan for this type of deck, but I do think he gives the deck some really nice flexibility. Next up, we have a Devil Dino deck, and I'm sure nobody saw this one coming. This is kind of the place that I think a lot of people are going to be putting Loki, and maybe he can bring some relevance back to Devil Dino, which is an archetype that has kind of fallen out of favor in recent months, not quite as popular as it used to be, at least among the higher ranks and collection levels, but I think this could be pretty solid. So we have a lot of ways to generate cards here: Mirage, Sentinel, Agent Coulson, Moon Girl, and Nick Fury. Just a ton of different generation. The Kitty Pryde Angela package, which on its own is good, and it's even better when we're adding the collector to the equation. Loki is going to give us a kind of alternative game plan, and we actually do have a bit of a combo here, which is kind of cool. So basically, what you can do is you can use Moon Girl to get 2 copies of not only your Devil Dino, but also Collector. And if you play 2 collectors on turn 5, we can close out the game by playing Agent Coulson to generate some more cards, and then Loki to swap our hand with the copies of the opponent's cards, and hopefully make 2 really large collectors that should close out the game for us. Quinjet going to be an all-star in Loki decks, as 1 cost reduction is already baked into the Loki effect, but when you add another cost reduction, things start to get really insane. We've kind of seen that in the past with Zabu. Turns out when you reduce cards cost by 2, they get pretty stupid pretty quickly when they're higher cost cards, like 4 and above. So I think that's going to be a potentially very powerful thing to be doing with Loki, is just taking your opponent's cards and being able to use them more effectively, both with his reduction effect alongside the Quinjet. Mirage is definitely a replaceable card here. I personally like her a bit better than the other options, but you could also include something like Maria Hill or Cable if you want a bit more budget option. Mirage definitely not required to play this kind of deck, but I kind of like the effect on her, particularly because of the information and the fact that we're already going to be playing our opponent's cards with Loki sometimes. Then it's pretty decent to start playing their cards before we play the Loki. And then of course Chavez just making an appearance in vast majority of these kinds of decks because it is just too good to be able to get the cards we're looking for when we need them in the early game, and we don't really care that much about what we're top decking on the final turn of the game. Then we have a bit of a lore focused deck, though still seems pretty scary here, and that is the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. So we're running all the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. cards here: Agent 13, Maria Hill, Agent Coulson, Nick Fury, and the one and only Helicarrier. I don't think this is going to be the best version of Loki, but it might be one of the more fun ones, and I think it could put up a fight in its own right. Being able to bring back that Helicarrier with Ghost Rider while generating cards for our Collector and our Loki to ship away into actually useful cards seems like a strong interaction. All of the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. cards basically replace themselves, so it guarantees our Loki is going to be making pretty high impact in this game, especially if we can get a hold of our Quinjet. And sometimes we can just go with the plan of using the cards we get off the Agents to try and close out the game. Moon Girl going to be able to give you that collector combo that was previously mentioned, as well as double dinos, which are always good. We're just keeping the hand size large into a late game Loki. And Ghost Rider and Sif allow us to get rid of that Helicarrier and bring it back for a big threat on the board while keeping our hand fairly large. And last but not least, we have a Dynoless version, which is really more focused on being able to do that collector combo with doubling it up into Agent Coulson and Loki, or even just some of our other generation cards. You could also consider Zabu in a deck like this. Obviously, there are only 2 4-drops. However, we can generate 4-drops from Coulson, we can generate them from the opponent, and that added flexibility of being able to get down Moon Girl or Nick Fury on turn 3 could be a nice addition. You could consider cutting armor for that, but I do like having armor just as a bit of a guarantee to help protect our 1-drops or anything big that we end up generating off of Loki or Nick. Again, Mirage, very replaceable card here, just take your pick. I like the generation, but you don't have to do that. You could put Zabu in that spot as well. It really comes down to personal preference here. You could also add in another later game card like White Queen. Really depends on just the cards you kind of enjoy for this style of archetype, but I do think not having Dino in this version is fine because we really want to be doing other stuff throughout the game rather than just slamming one big threat or trying to copy our big threat. I think we can generally generate enough power off of stealing opponents' cards, generating our own cards, pumping the Collector, pumping our Kitty and Angela, to where we don't really have to worry about the fact that we don't have a big Dino, and it's one less card to kind of clog up our hand that we can't play in the early game. And there we have it. That is going to wrap it up for our Day 1 Loki decks. As always, links to the decks will be in the description if you want to import them into the game for yourself. But I'd love to hear what you think. What do you think about the decks? What do you think about Loki? What are you excited to try with him? Definitely love to hear it in the comments below. But that's going to wrap it up for this video. If you enjoyed it, remember to like and subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.